collaboration with the National Stock Exchange, brings together eminent academicians, researchers to deliberate on pressing contemporary economic issues across microeconomics, macroeconomics, development, finance, trade, public economics, and emerging areas. We are truly honored by your presence today. We shall begin the inauguration with the ceremonial lighting of the lamp, followed by the prayer songs, during which I request everyone to please stand. We proceed with the lighting of the lamp.
करो ये करो ना मेल मेल में भेज दो इधर मत कॉपी नहीं करो इधर है ना लिंक है कॉपी है वो कॉपी कर मोबाइल नंबर
I request everyone to remain standing for the prayer song. Please felicitate our keynote speaker, Professor Das, with a memento. Madam, we request you to please felicitate.
इसको कॉपी वाला कॉपी क्लोज करो व्हाट्सएप में भेजो
I am deeply honored to invite our respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. Father K.S. Casimir, S.J., to address us. Father brings over 33 years of distinguished leadership experience in higher education and assumed office as Vice Chancellor of Exam University, Bhubaneswar. Father, please address us.
Professor Mausami Das, Professor, Delhi School of Economics, Dr. Golaknath, Dean, School of Economics, academic luminaries from other industries, institutes, faculty, members from the print and electronic media, and my beloved students of the School of Economics, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to each and every one of you, and a warm welcome to this international conference. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to XIM University, which is a part of other Xavier institution, XLRI, St. Xavier's Mumbai, St. Xavier's Kolkata, and other chain of institutions across India and the world. It is rooted in Jesuit values that truly believes in spreading knowledge to empower people. I am happy that the School of Economics has organized a two-day international conference on contemporary issues in economics in collaboration with the National Stock Exchange of India, Mumbai, a prestigious non-academic financial market institution. This is an academic industry collaborative approach that is needed for the betterment of you young minds. This is the third year of the conference, which allows researchers to exchange innovative ideas and share their knowledge with other academicians and students of economics. The research papers were shortlisted following a peer review process. The important deliberations over these 2 days will add significant value to our society's knowledge warehouse. The conference aims to bring together academics, researchers from academic and non-academic domains, faculty members, and PhD students to present their unpublished original research on contemporary economic issues. The best papers are recognized and rewarded. There is also a poster session for PhD students and early career PhD students. Academic luminaries from various academic institutions will participate in this conference to exchange ideas and share their knowledge. We are proud to host researchers from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Banaras Hindu University, University of Hyderabad, South Asian University, New Delhi, Madras School of Economics, Birla Institute of Technology, Mesra, Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research, University of Kalyani, Ravenshaw University, West Bengal State University, Government Women's College, Jaipur, South Calcutta Girls College, and Center for Advanced Financial Research and Learning from RBI. The National Stock Exchange has generously supported the conference through funding for 2 consecutive years. Dr. Tirthankar Patnaik, Chief Economist from NSE, will attend the conference with his thoughts on retail investors' participation in the financial market. We'll have Professor Mausami Das, Professor, Delhi School of Economics, who has kindly agreed to deliver the keynote address for the conference. The conference will feature presentations by researchers over these 2 days and will be supported by special plenary session with eminent speakers such as Professor Saurav Bhattacharya, Professor, Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata, Professor Sharabani Saha, Professor, University of Lincoln, United Kingdom. There will be a specific panel discussion on the theme From Independence to Insularity, Geopolitical Factors and Economic Shocks Reshaping Global Flows, with luminary panelists like Professor Vivek Roy Chowdhury, Professor IIFT Kolkata, Professor Mitali Chinara, Professor Utkal University Bhubaneswar, Dr. Amarendra Das, Associate Professor, NISA Bhubaneswar. The discussion is timely as dynamic and volatile changes are occurring globally and geopolitical factors are driving international relations among nations. The academic sessions in the conference will be chaired by academicians from several institutions such as IIT Bhubaneswar, BITS Pilani Hyderabad, Kids School of Economics, BJV College, Utkal University, and IIFT. We are happy to acknowledge that we have received research papers from Nepal, Senegal, and Nigeria. However, they are not able to attend due to various constraints. XIM University aims to continue this endeavor of organizing international conferences in the future to recognize the original research work in the economics domain. And I hope and dream that it will become a landmark event not only in Bhubaneswar, Odisha, in the east of India, eventually in India. I am sure the deliberations over the next 2 days will be rich and rewarding for all stakeholders, particularly your students. And I wish the conference a great success. God bless and thank you.
Thank you, Father, for outlining the academic spirit and the objectives of this conference. I now invite Dean, School of Economics. I would now request Dr. Paramita Mukherjee, Professor at XIM University, School of Economics, to please introduce the keynote speaker.
Good morning. Professor Moushumi Das joined the Department of Economics, Delhi School of Economics in 2005 and is currently a professor of economics. She has previously held faculty positions at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi and the Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi, and also held a visiting faculty position at the Indian Statistical Institute, Delhi Center. She received a PhD from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. She is an alumnus of Presidency College, Kolkata. Her area of specialization is economic growth and development. She has published research articles in various reputed international journals such as Journal of Economic Dynamics and Control, Journal of Economic Growth, and Journal of Development Economics. She is currently serving as an associate editor of Economic Modeling and Journal of Economic Asymmetries. I request Professor Das to share a few words.
Respected Vice Chancellor, Dean, colleagues, students, friends, it's really honor, a privilege to be here. This is my first visit to XIM Bhubaneswar. Although I've heard about this place from other colleagues who visited in the past and also some of your students whom I met elsewhere. So I think as the respected Vice Chancellor said, earlier in his speech, it's really a privilege to be part of an institution of higher education in India, because you are the people who are going to take us forward, and in some sense the knowledge that we are building together in these institutions are really the sort of, it's investment for all of us collectively towards future. So in some sense, the whole idea about this exchange is also to facilitate that investment. And I really look forward to meeting all of you today, talking to all of you and hear from you, because academia is like, unlike most other fields, it's really something where ideas flourish, and ideas do not necessarily come from the more experienced people. It also comes from young bright minds like you. So that's why this kind of conferences are important, for not only for you, not also for us. And I look forward to interacting with you during the day. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Professor Das, for your valuable insights. May I now invite Dean School of Economics, Dr. Golaka Sina, to share a few words. Professor brings a balanced perspective that integrates theoretical insight with practical developments in financial markets.
Thank you. Respected Vice Chancellor, I will also thank Father Registrar, who has been a big support for the school. Due to some urgent assignment, he could not attend today. And Professor Mousumi Das, our keynote speaker, coming down from Delhi to attend this particular conference is, we really value that. The conference, is a brainchild of the school, and this is a third, conference. And actually, Professor Paramita has revived this conference. In fact, to share with you, she, after her arrival in the school, she only, revived this, because we had one, then we stopped having, further that. Then we, thanks to NSC, we came forward for funding. It is a place where we can exchange ideas, research, because original research papers are presented by the researchers. We can talk to our peers at various academic institutions. Our students can learn leadership skills, and they can learn about what exactly, how much amount of effort goes into real quality research, talk to senior academicians, luminaries, meet people, and exchange ideas. So these 2 days of conference, we are going to have, I think 16, 17 papers are total are there. So these particular papers they vary from development economics to financial markets. A lot of issues are being researched, and people are going to present. They are going to be very interesting ones. Right? One of our ex-students who has joined Capral, Bismay Kumar Barik, he is also presenting a paper. I was very happy to see him. One of our own products coming up and doing, and we have also one of our existing students presenting a paper, Shruti Tayal, I think. And today we are going to, we'll start with the keynote address. We'll hear from Professor Mousumi Das about culture, occupation, choice, and growth. This is a very important topic, of social change, how this is basically, matter in economics. Then we are going to have at 2 o'clock Dr. Tirthankar Patnaik with the Chief Economist of NSC, as well as in the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Panel. He's a member of that. And he's going to talk to us about the post-pandemic retail investment behavior, how the dynamics have changed. People, staying at home, how it has actually undergone dramatic changes in the financial market. How the young people are coming to the market, in the stock and derivatives markets, compared to before pandemic, where mostly middle-aged and old people used to normally trade. So then we are going to have a panel discussion, which will basically talk about geopolitical factors, and which is reshaping the global flows. And we'll have a couple of plenary sessions as well. Tomorrow we're going to have plenary sessions. Professor Saurabh Bhattacharya and Professor Sarvani Shah are going to take us through. And a lot of interesting topics, a lot of interesting ideas. And let me thank once again for the Vice Chancellor, who had other commitments, and because he has to again immediately move to another school there, they also postponed their little bit of time to accommodate our requests. And it is very kind of him, because without his support and guidance, we cannot really progress much. So thank you once again, Father, for being here. It means a lot to us. And also I thank Professor Moswin Das. Once again, we are waiting to hear from her once from 10 o'clock when the keynote address will start. So with this, I thank you once again, everybody here, and for attending this, and I welcome all the researchers who have come down here, and we are happy to host you. And I'm sure if there is any difficulty, please consider it is as itself as your home, and ignore those deficiencies, and we'll be nicely meeting you people at the evening. Also, we have some arrangements for evening get together, so we'll meet you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Na, for highlighting the theme of the conference. We will be beginning with the keynote speech shortly. I request everyone to please switch off your phone, or please put your phone on silence.
There is no break now. We are going to start.
I have the PPT explained to the volunteer. No? Get the desk ready.
May I now invite the chair of this session, Professor Saurabh Bhattacharya, to kindly take over the proceedings.
Ma'am, ready my presentation, or which presentation has to be given?
Ma'am's presentation, ma'am is given in the pen drive in the morning. He was here in the morning, there was so much else. Laminate presentation. And what हमारे students ने बहुत
अरे राज सर,
राशन तो दे दो।
ये लदाख के साथ तो वही
नहीं नहीं नहीं
नहीं है पूछ लीजिए कहाँ है
This one's freeze the screen. Screen is frozen.
It doesn't quite matter whether it's this chair or that chair. From this chair, I can see better. So I invite Professor Moshmi Das to give a talk on culture, occupation, choice, and growth. As far as we understand, it will be we have about an hour for this, so maybe about 45 minutes for the talk and 10 to 15 minutes discussion.
Yes, Mama.
Maybe I should just, start with a broad overview until the slide moves to the next one. When Paramita invited me, my initial thought was, what do I talk about? Do I give a... This is an area where some of my students are doing research, and this is a very vibrant area of research right now. So I could have given you a broad overview, which I have done in a couple of talks earlier, but I wanted to utilize this opportunity to tell you exactly how the framework works. So therefore, I decided to present an overview of my research work. For the MA students, these are going to, and the undergrad students, these are going to involve some theoretical structure, but the structure is not going to be difficult at all. So, and if you sort of have any questions, please feel free to ask me. But I just thought that it's important for you to sort of see how this framework works rather than reading up a little bit about where the framework, these kind of frameworks have been applied in general in the profession. So that's roughly why I chose this particular topic and the research work. I can't use it myself?
Yes.
Then what is it?
It's working now.
No.
But,
हाँ हो जाएगा सी पेन ड्राइव रे लगा दो सी पेन ड्राइव ओपन अच्छा पेन ड्राइव
Okay. So I want to first, the title says that I'm going to talk about culture, occupation, choice, and economic growth. Now, culture is a buzzword these days. Everybody's talking about culture, various kind of culture, and it's not even clear what culture in general means. Are we talking about individual preferences? Are we talking about group preferences? Are we talking about a society's way of looking at things, and so on and so forth? And indeed, in the literature on economics, almost all these definitions have been applied in different contexts. So in the first place, if I want to talk about culture and its relationship with growth, first I have to clarify what do I mean by culture, because it's really a black box which is floating out there, and different researchers have used the term differentially. And so at the very outset, I want to clarify that the way we are going to look at culture, and I'm not the only one, there are many people who are going to look at culture, it's an individual trait, and that individual trait is represented by beliefs, values, and preferences of an agent, yours and mine. And but these beliefs, preferences, and values are shaped by a certain process. And there are three important features of that process. One is that this is acquired through social interaction. Second one is this particular features, the traits that we have, do not have any direct economic value. In other words, it's not as if that if you have a specific cultural trait, then that you can exchange in the market and it gives you higher market returns or something, not directly at least. And the third very important feature that researchers have highlighted in the context of culture is basically, or culture as an individual trait, is that this trait transmits across generation. It's not something that you immediately pick up in your lifetime, and it's something that comes from your parental generation to the next generation and transmitted from generation to generation. In other words, this is one particular trait which moves, but it's very slow to move. It moves across generations. And having said that, so this is again not the only way to think about culture. You can think about culture as a group specific norm where everybody has to abide by. So that's another way to think about culture, but we are going to, so these are two different competing ways to think about culture, but we are going to, many of the papers that I'm going to refer to in the next slide looks at culture in this particular individual way. And, there is some element of that in all of us. So in a way, if we think about culture as individual trait, it becomes analyzed to look at our action in light of this particular cultural lens and then try to say something about that. So that's how we are going to look at culture. I also want to emphasize at the very outset that this kind of individual traits that we're talking about, very often you could say that, well, how is it different from something called soft skill, how well we communicate, what are your, how outwardly you are in terms of communicating, mixing with people and so on and so forth. Those are what we call soft skill. And then how is it culture different from that? And my answer to that goes back to the second point, which says that, well, if those kind of skills are giving you direct market return, then I will not call them culture. So one defining feature of individual trait, which is culture, is that it does not have any immediate market value. It just augments your utility and preferences. It has a preference implication, not income implication. The second one becomes important again, that there are people who are talking about various kind of peer effects, network effects within the generation. You learn from your peers, you pick up traits from your peer, they're loving a movie, you also love a movie, and so on and so forth. Again, that kind of particular trait or preference transmits across agents, but that's all contemporaneous within the same generation, whereas culture typically is thought as slow to move, does not change immediately, and therefore the third point becomes important. The way we look at culture is basically it takes time. Typically, if you're, this kind of cultures are inculcated in you when you're a child, and it remains the same throughout your lifetime. Okay, so with these three important definitions of the way we are going to view culture. Now I want you to think a little bit about
It's not working. No.
Okay, so traditionally, culture, there's a flourish of work in this area, but traditionally economists have been very, very sort of apprehensive about talking about culture, and for a very important reason. And the reason being that, first of all, culture can be a black box. Anything that you can't explain, you can say, oh, it's culture. There was no way to sort of test this particular thing, which has changed in recent years in the sense that people have been able to empirically trace cultural values to various kind of, first of all, there are all different surveys which allows you to state your preferences better. There are experiments which allows you to pin down your preferences. Earlier, those kind of data were not available. And there are econometric techniques which are available which can pin down your preferences to a certain different, non-economic identities and so on. So again, that allows you to disentangle this non-economic factor called culture from other sources. So because of these two reasons, work on culture in recent years has flourished. But typically, in all this, most of the literature, even now, takes these beliefs as something. Until recently, they were taking this as given. So, we know that they're there. We might be able to measure them also, but we take them as exogenous. So in other words, typically it was believed that economic factors has nothing to do with those preferences. You pick it up from whatever. your ethnic identity, your religious identity, and so on and so forth. And economic factors do not sort of influence those. That view is beginning to change, and this is where my sort of paper talks to the literature, because it has been empirically shown that these beliefs, even though they are slow to change, they move from one generation to another generation. They do change over time, and they do change responding to economic forces. So therefore, taking culture as a completely independent superstructure on an economic story is no longer a valid way to think about it. You have to think about the interaction between these two different separate forces. One is a social force, one is an economic force or market. And in my model, I'm going to tell you in a particular specific way in which we look at these two interaction and what is the outcome for the long run economic as well as cultural prospect for an economy where these two forces interact. So what we do is, ignore the jargon here. We are going to build a sort of theoretical construct where these two factors are going to interact with each other, and the context in which we are going to interact these two forces. One is a social force called culture, one is a economic force called income, and so on and so forth. And the context in which we are going to interact them is in the context of occupation choice. That's not the only way in which culture and market interacts. It could be many other decisions, but occupation choice is an easy way to motivate the story, and I'm going to motivate the story by using an occupational structure where culture might have something to say. But as I said, culture can have other influences. Culture can have impact your savings behavior, your other behaviors, and so on and so forth. So this is only an example. And to the extent occupation choice of agents have an implication for growth, in the sense that how many people are joining the productive occupation vis-a-vis non-productive occupation has implication for the overall economy, then this occupation choice will have something to say about the growth process. This is where most of the recent work and not so recent work has been, and I have not given you all the references, but these are the key references where culture has been, culture on individual preferences particularly has been demonstrated to impact growth. So the examples are, very interesting examples. So Classing's paper in JD talks about how people's preference for risk interact with their aptitude or their willingness to become entrepreneur, because entrepreneurial income could be risky, and more entrepreneur means that more innovation. Even though it might be risky for the individual, it's good for the economy, and therefore that's one sphere where culture and economics can interact to generate a certain process of long run growth. Another example is basically value for education, the status for education, and this is again we as Indian can relate to, in the sense that many of us coming from our parents put special emphasis on education. You have to be educated, irrespective of not necessarily thinking about the corresponding outcome. But those kind of values inculcated in you might generate more human capital in this kind of society, where education has a value, separate value, and that may promote growth. Again, that's the Moore and Neiman paper. Then there is another set of examples, particularly this particular paper by Guizzo, Sapienza, Zingales, which talks about how your patience, how thrifty you are. Again, you inculcate this cultural behavioral trait called thriftiness from your family and parents inculcating in you, and that generates, makes you more thrifty and therefore generates more physical capital, which again can promote growth for the economy. Right? So these are different examples. The last one is being talked about much in India right now, which is your family values. How important do you think families are vis-a-vis going out and working for various kind of lucrative jobs? And in India, in the context of female labor force participation, this factor has been highlighted multiple times. How your cultural values about families, importance of family, in this case, might come in the way of economic development, simply because even though you're very capable, you decide that family come first and you don't go out and work, right? So these are different demonstration of how individual traits can interact with the overall economy. But the most of this work including some others which I haven't put in here in the form of references, take this cultural factor as given, or they think about a cultural transmission process, how culture is evolving through a completely independent force which has nothing to do with the economic conditions. And this is exactly where we come in, and our work is going to demonstrate that that's not necessarily true. There are many areas, in particular in the context of occupation choice, where the cultural forces determine my bias maybe towards different occupation. But then when I go out and look for a job, that's only one factor that determines what kind of job I'm going to take up. If the economic conditions are such that some jobs are paying me a way too much compared to what was my initially preferred job, then in many cases we go for that. And I'm going to give you some examples which I believe you'll be able to relate to. The high school students do relate to those kind of examples that I'm going to talk about in a moment. But then the question is that if market forces and economic conditions determine the wages that you're going to get, and that interacts with your innate inherited preferences, then that becomes a more complex story where culture and economic forces are interacting, and then you want to know what is going to happen in the ultimately out of this both way interaction, what is going to be the outcome for the economy as well as for individuals' choices. Okay, so given this setup, this is another area where our work relates to. Again, there are some broad areas where people have very few papers, but those papers that I quote here are going to look at joint evolution of various kind of institutions. So they talk about social and political institution, social and legal institutions, social and organizational institution in the workplace, and so on. And ours is also a subset of that broad literature. We are going to look at two sort of orthogonal institutions. One is culture, one is market. So here is a brief sketch of what is going to come in terms of more theoretical structure, but the story is really very simple. And this slide sort of gives you the entire story in a nutshell. So the idea is that imagine a world where there are many different types of cultural values, heterogeneous values. Somebody likes red, somebody likes blue, and so on and so forth. In my case, those red and blue are translated into some preference for occupation. Then there are diverse set of occupations, so you can choose from. So those are the two things that you are going to sort of focus on. And these cultural values, whether you like red, blue, yellow, and so on, are transmitted you pick it up from your parents. The parents, through their action during your childhood, has given you a preference for blue, red, whatever, some color or some occupation. Now, but the way the parents do it is that basically the parent had to spend some time to inculcate that kind of preference in you when you were a child. So this depends on time. This is something which is this particular way of inculcating values in you is time sensitive. And if that is time sensitive, that's exactly where economic factors become important. Because imagine that your parent is very busy, has an occupation which demands a lot of time. It might be a very high paying occupation, but that also means that the opportunity cost of spending time with you to inculcate certain values are going to be very high, simply because, and that cost is market determined, right? So if the parents are in a very high paying job, high wages, then that means they have the opportunity cost of spending time is going to be higher correspondingly. And that is where the economics is going to come in and say that, okay, then who are the parents, or how much time parents are going to determine in inculcating certain values, even if they think those values are important for you. Well, that is going to depend on economic conditions, market forces, and so on and so forth. Now, that basically is where the parental action and their parental economic condition comes in. Now think about you. You are coming with a certain preference because of whatever parents have inculcated in you. Now you are thinking about which occupation to join, and you have a preference, as I said, for different, blue, red, and so on. But the point is, when you come to that, those are the biases that you take with me, cultural biases that you take with you to the job market. But when you go to the job market and you see the profile of job of income, then you are going to look at those through your bias, but you are not necessarily sticking. If one profession which is not your favored profession but gives you a way high job, then you are going to take that. So that's another way in which for the younger generation again, economic forces come and interact with your preferences. It's not as if that the preferences are completely sacrosanct in your decision-making process. You are going to choose the profession after looking at it through your bias. But if that profession, even though it was not in your initial set, gives you a very high return, you're going to flip your bias. So these are the two forces in which in our model, economic condition is going to influence these cultural practices through the transmission mechanism, as well as how cultural traits sort of allows you to make the decision-making process, in the sense that it's not just cultural trait, it also going to interact with market income. And as a result of this, because of these two processes, your inherited culture and the market wage rate, eventually you are going to choose an occupation, and that occupation might have implication for the economic growth and overall economy. So that's going to be the basically the story here. And because of your process, in the next period, the economic condition will change. If the economic condition changes, then the parental cost of inculcative values are also going to change. And that's going to generate a different set of values for you. And that set of values are again going to interact with the then economic condition and so on, and the story goes on. So this is basically the setup. And in this setup then, we are going to think about, as I already have said, that there are two ways in which market will come and talk to the cultural traits. One is when the parents are deciding how much time to invest. The other one is when you are choosing, given your inherited culture, which occupation to join. Okay, this is the two platform where culture and market will interact. In this setup, the interesting questions are the following. Given that your cultural trait and economic factors are interacting, and both are sort of endogenously determining, one is determining the other one is again determining this one, then the question is that if they're interacting, and I go for even whatever is my cultural trait, I'm going to go for the job that pays me higher wages, and higher wages translate into less time for my children to inculcate that cultural trait, and so on and so forth. So given this two-way interaction, do I expect to see eventual over time income convergence? And I'll tell you why that's a possibility. That's a possibility because the people who are have currently higher income are likely to spend less time with their children. And if they spend less time with the children, those kind of cultural traits are going to become rarer and rarer. And therefore, eventually, so one way is that they're going to be cultural assimilation. They're going to go away. Or if the cultural assimilation does not go away, then with those cultural traits, people are joining the occupation which gives them higher income. So you're going to see higher income convergence. So either there's going to be income convergence because no matter what your cultural trait is, you want to go for the better paying occupation. So income is going to converge, or because better paying occupation also has this higher cost, the cultural trait itself may become rare and rare, and everybody converges to similar trait. So both are possible, and therefore the interesting question is, does it happen given the structure of the model? Are we always going to see one of the two convergences? Either wages all become equal, then cultural trait really doesn't have any economic bearing, or all culture becomes similar, everybody is doing the same thing, and then tagging you as a somebody who prefers blue and red really doesn't have economic meaning. Right? So does it happen or does it not happen? If that does not happen, then that's something that tells you that therefore culture has a long run implication. Initial culture might have a longer shadow on the economic behavior of people. Okay, so we want to look at that. So here is again, just don't pay attention to the jargon because these are standard economics modeling jargon, but what we are going to think about is a household where it's called overlapping generation, because in every household there is a parent and a child. Parent is an adult and the child is just, in that generation born to the parent is taking all the important decisions about occupation choice, how much time to spend with the child, and the child is there and the child is simply picking up a cultural trait, not doing anything, maybe consuming along with the parent and so on and so forth, but picking up the cultural trait of that's inculcated to the child by the parent. So the only job as a child, as a only important thing that's happening to the child as a sort of a residual measure, not direct action, is that the parent is spending time and the child is picking up a preference trait. The child is picking up a preference trait. That's what the child is doing. All the actions are happening with the adult agent. So the adult agent is basically, the adult agent already has a certain cultural trait picked up during his childhood. Now he is first deciding which occupation to choose, then his income is distributed between consumption. His occupation is on, he decides how much to work and how much to spend with child, and then his consumption and so on and so forth. Right? So basically all those important economic actions are coming from the adult agent, and that includes the fact that the adult agent also has to spend some time with the child. So the question is, how much time is he going to spend with the child, which determines the child's cultural preferences in the next period. So to fix ideas, we are going to think about two occupations. For want of any better word, I'm going to call them scientists and managers. Both these occupations are very important for the current economy. Both contribute positively to the current economy. But scientists, to the extent that their discoveries stay in the knowledge base for presumably, Saurabh is laughing, but whatever. So it's self-promotion. He knows that. So academicians and scientists like to believe that what they're teaching stays there for posterity. But if we assume that kind of externality is possible, then scientists have an extra benefit that they create a knowledge base which is going to be there in the next generation as well. So, and for somebody who become a scientist tomorrow, can you pick up sort of all the theorems came from Einstein? They don't have to develop it again on their own. Okay. So in that sense, the professions are exactly symmetric currently, but one occupation has a future growth implication. I'll come back to that point later when I talk about growth. Here is again, those of you who have already done Micro 101 might have seen this kind of what is called a production structure. And the production function basically says the total output is a function of the inputs that's going in there. This is a standard Cobb-Douglas production function. One input is the scientific input, how much scientists are working, how many are scientists and what is the time they're spending. And the other one is a managerial input, how many are becoming managers and how much time they're spending, and that generates a total GDP in the economy. How much are they paid? What is the market return to this profession? Well, in any standard Micro 101, it tells you that every factor is paid its marginal product, and those marginal product is defined over there by WS and WA. WS is basically the per unit of scientific input, how much a scientist is paid, and WM is per unit of managerial input, how much a manager is paid. Okay, and those are both determined by the market and also the production function. Now, the crucial question here is that what is going to be the total managerial input and the scientific input? Because these are not given at the moment. These are going to depend on the choices, occupation choice of the agents endogenously. And that's where it's going to be different from the standard growth models. Typically in standard growth model, we say that, oh, these are your number of scientists, these are your number of managers, and they are going to produce so much output. Here we are saying that who becomes manager, who becomes scientist, it's not a foregone conclusion. You are going to decide on that with looking at the wages, and the wages themselves depend on those ratios. And that creates a sort of complexity. And before I go to the complexity, I want to tell you that therefore, implicit in this assumption is that who becomes a manager, who becomes a scientist really depends on how you are visualizing yourself, how much wage you are earning, right? So it's a kind of, you are doing an, MA in or a BA in XIMB, and you are thinking about whether to apply for a job in so-and-so institute or go for this position in this corporate sector. You are trying to think about the wages, and in any standard, perfectly competitive micro model, those wages eventually will depend on how many others were also applying for that position and got that job, right? So in a way, you're doing a forward-looking exercise, try to anticipate that and decide on your occupation choice. So that means that basically we are going to think about the market as a completely free market. It's not as if, and that's a sort of simplifying assumption, it's not as if that you need very special training to join either managerial job or become a scientist. That's a very simplification assumption, but that also means that nothing constrains you to join any occupation other than your cultural sort of trait that you carry with you. Okay, so that's the, I want to focus on that. So I'm assuming away all other realistic barriers to changing occupation, that you need so many, whatever, a degree, MBA degree, and so on and so forth. Imagine that none of that is needed. You can change occupation. The only thing that's constraining you is that which one do you want to join. In such a scenario, therefore, I'm going to now talk about preference. And as I said, preference is going to be determined by do you like blue or yellow. This blue and yellow here is going to translate into two different traits. Again, I have called them very specific name, but don't take them literally. So I'm going to call a type, cultural type, a personality type now, which is called, I'm going to call them Nardi. I'm also calling them scholarly because it matches with S. But imagine that these are Nardi people. These are the people who want to study and take exam, eventually look at research papers and so on and so forth. All those boring jobs, but which helps you maybe kind of tells them that certain profession is preferable to them. They believe. The other one, we call them materialist, whatever it's, these are the trendy people, these are the fashionable people, go with whatever gives them better income, better lifestyle, and so on and so forth. So Nardi and trendy are probably something that you can relate to. Scholarly and materialistic has been used only because I wanted to match it with S&M. So imagine that in this period, all of you who are looking for jobs, adult agent, there are exactly, this is a cultural type. This is what has come to you from your parents. Some parents said, beta paro and so on and so forth, so you become a scholarly people. Some people said that relax, enjoy and so on, and maybe you have become the trendy people. So whatever, because of that, now currently there is a set of people who are the Nardi type, a set of people who are the trendy type, but all of them are looking at the same job market. And then the question is, what jobs are they going to pick up? And that will depend on their return. Now, what is this Nardi people and trendy people different when they look at the job market? The only difference is that they're looking at the same income. But the point is, the Nardi people, for this cultural trait that has been inculcated to them in their parents, are prefer science occupation because this is kind of suitable to their personalities. How do I capture this bias that comes from culture? I capture this bias by saying that, well, they don't know the market wage rate exactly, but when it comes to comparing the two wage rate, if the scientific wages is lower than managerial wages. So Q is a number which is greater than 1, which means 1 by Q is a fraction. They are happy to work as a scientist. So it's not as if they're always looking for better or same wage rate. They're happy to become a scientist as long as there is a wage differential. But that way, they're willing to take a wage cut to become a scientist as long as the wage cut is not too much, as long as the wage rate is still maybe half of the managerial wage rate or 1/3 of the managerial wage rate and so on and so forth. Yeah. Q is exogenously given. That's your cultural marker. That's the only thing that you carry with you, nothing else. Yeah. So in different societies, the Q might differ, but those are the only cultural marker in our model. Yeah. So that's the only place where this cultural trait comes in and influences your choice. Basically, you say that, okay, these are the wages that I'm contemplating. You're the Nardi type. Then you say that, all right, science profession is giving me 1/3 of the managerial wages, but I can live with that. The trendy people will say that, no, I don't have Q is by definition 1 for trendy people, and I'll go only if they give me higher pay. If they're not giving me higher pay, I'll go basically whatever is giving me the higher pay. So this is where the cultural trait is influencing your choice, and this is very important. For one set of people, they are willing to take a wage cut because they have a bias towards some profession. The other people will go basically whichever gives them a higher wage rate. Okay, and then basically, therefore, then it comes down to, so this is where the story for as far as you guys are concerned is going to stop. Then I go back to the previous story about where did this P and 1 minus T population came from, where did you pick up this trait? And so I'm going to now go to the parental story. How did they inculcate this trait in you? So I'm going to come back to this, your choice of education in a moment. But before that, let me go back, revisit the story, a flashback, so to speak, to see how parents, different set of people with different preferences, where did they come from? And they came from the parental action. And why did parents got into that action of inculcating in you certain kind of, preferences, red, blue, and so on? Well, the answer, and that's, almost the literature is quite clear about that. The reason why parents want to inculcate their kind of preferences and certain kind of preferences is not always necessarily for economic reason, but also because they believe that these are good values. You should learn music, you should study, that has an independent value. And therefore, I'm going to assume, and that's again standard in the literature, that parents want to inculcate these values in their children for egoistic reason. I care for reading storybooks. I want my child to read storybook. I care for whatever Kathak. I want my child to learn Kathak, and so on and so forth, even though that may or may not have any economic value. And if that is the motivation, then how much time am I going to spend? Why should I spend my time? And so on depends on how much, as a parent, I'm getting an utility by allowing my child to become like myself. Okay. And that is captured by this particular utility function. I'll come back to that utility function. Sorry. So I'll come back to that utility function in a moment. What drives the parent to spend his time? But here is the parental issue, that I'm going to spend time with my child. Is it necessary that the child will also like my type? I'm trying to make my child read storybooks. Is it necessarily the case that my child will pick up this habit of reading storybooks? The answer is no. There's some probability. The probability goes up the more time you spend, but it's still a probabilistic measure. So then, when I'm thinking about spending my child, this is the time that I'm spending with my child. Then it's not certain that if I spend this time, the child will surely become a book-loving type or become like me. So that's a probability, a number between 0 and 1, a fraction. What happens if the child does not become like me? The child still, I'm a failure in terms of transmitting my values. Can the child still love books by maybe looking at a teacher, maybe looking at some other role model from the society? The answer is yes. To allow for that, then we assume that, well, if you're a book lover, or if you're a certain type, if you like read and you want your child to be, also love read or love books, then this is the probability with which the child will pick it up directly from you. The probability, 1 minus tau probability, is that the child does not. You are a failure as a parent. You haven't been able to transmit it to your child, but the child can still pick it up from all the other people in your generation who are book lovers. So think about the teacher. If the teacher is a book lover, you are randomly matched with not me, but somebody else in your generation, but that person has exactly your traits, then again the child can become a book lover. He hasn't picked it up directly from you, but he has picked it up from the teacher, from somebody else, from the club guide, and so on and so forth. Okay? So then the idea is that each parent is going to spend some time to inculcate the values, but the child can also pick up the values from the population outside who are like the parents. Same values, the parent is not unsuccessful, but the child can still become like that, provided they are going to meeting a person who looks like has the same values as the parent. So this probability therefore tells you what is the chance that your child will become like you, either directly because of your effort or because there are many people like you outside and the child is going to pick it up from outside. This is similarly for the other type, like you, the child becomes like me. I'm the M type now. I like red, and then I'm unsuccessful, but the child still picks it up from many other people like me. And remember, many other people who are red now is 1 minus P, the other set of the population. This is blue type. This is M type out in the population. Now comes the what is it that the parents are looking for when they're spending time? Parents want to, if they don't spend time with the children, then they can earn a wage rate in the labor market, and then they consume it, and that's their consumption utility. That's a standard utility function that you always see in your 101 micro. So that's how you give me consumption, I get utility. But I'm going to, because the parents are also get some utility if their children become like them, then I'm going to add another term here, which is this. That if my child becomes like me, I'm a book lover, my child becomes a book lover, then I get a certain constant utility in addition to my consumption utility. If my child does not become like me, then that utility value is 0. So that means with probability, what is my expected utility from spending time with my child? If my child becomes like me, which is probabilistic, depends on my effort, depends on how many people like me are out there, then this is the extra utility that I get in addition to my consumption utility. I care for my consumption, but I also care for my how much my child is becoming like me. So this is the parental utility from coming from child. This is direct consumption utility. And I'm going to decide about my tau looking at those. Tau, my times enters in both cases, but there's a trade-off. If I spend too much time in trying to inculcate this value in my child, then I get less consumption utility, right? So depending on therefore this kind of objective function of the parents are going to determine their optimal time spent. And that optimal time spent in parenting, I'm just going to forget about the equation. I'm going to show you a diagram which tells you that every parent is going to decide. This is the S type. This is the, let's say, the red type. Every red parent is going to decide on how much time to spend with the child, looking at two factors. One is what is the wage rate. Here is the wage rate. And the other one is how many of this type is there in the population. PT is how many of their type is in the population. So for any given population, suppose 50% of the population are his type, in the adult population. Then the higher is the wage rate, the lower is the time that he wants to spend, because there's an opportunity cost. On the other hand, for any wage rate, the higher is the population of his type. Again, he wants to spend less time because the child is going to pick it up from the outside anyway. He doesn't have to spend time. If there are too many people like me, then why do I spend costly time? He's going to go out. The teacher is like me. The sports instructor is like me. He's going to pick up the treat anyway, right? So both these means that basically what I have written over there, that if wages go up, I spend less time. If my type goes up, I spend less time, right? And likewise here, this is the red type. If their wages go up, they spend less time. If their proportion in the population goes up, then they spend less time, right? And together, this brings us, so this is for the other type, their proportion, you are going to measure them from here. The higher is their proportion, they spend less time, and the higher is the wage rate, they spend less time. And you can see that there is a boundary beyond which, if the wage is very high, or if the proportion is very high, then you are not going to spend any time at all. It becomes zero. You're not going to spend time. You're going to focus on your work and let others in the society do your job. You know that you know with some probability, big probability, large probability, that your child is going to pick up the trait anyway from the larger population, right? Given this trade-off, then this is the sort of two interaction between these two types: the red type S and the blue type. And you can see that if both the wages, and this is where the wage rate, economic factor comes in, if both people have very high wages, then nobody is going to spend time with the children. And if nobody is going to spend time with the children, what is going to be the distribution of type in the next generation? They're just going to pick it up randomly. I'm not spending, my parent is not spending time, your parent is not spending time. They're just going to go out, find a teacher, find a sports person. So that means only PT and 1 minus PT is going to be the relevant term. Tau becomes 0. And therefore, your trait is simply depends on today there are PT and 1 minus PT. Tomorrow also it will be PT and 1 minus PT, because that's the probability that's going to be decisive for you. Am I clear? Right? This is really one of the main results of our model, which basically says, this is written in terms of proposition, but really the proposition is read best in terms of the diagram. All that it says is that if your wage is very high, then you do not spend time. On the other hand, if wages are low, then you're going to, in one cases, one set of people are going to spend time. So the population is going to move in over one direction. More and more next generation will be the S type. In this case, the other people is going to spend more time. More and more next generation will be the N type. And this is where both of them are spending time. And this is really where the wages are very low. And both types are trying very hard to convert their children to their cultural type. Now, this is, I'm talking, as you can already see, I'm just thinking in terms of occupation and occupational trait, but this can be related to any kind of cultural traits. I want my child to be sort of, more family oriented, or more religious or whatever, all this will come up exactly in the same way. It doesn't necessarily have to be occupation choice. So that's one of the main results of our paper, which basically says, Paramita, I'm probably run out of time, right? So it's 10:45. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap up in 5 minutes. So that basically is the one of the main results. Then the question that comes up is that basically what is going to happen? And one question is that the wages are all endogenous. We have to solve for that, and so on and so forth. And that's a complicated process, which tells me that initially, if there are many of my type, then my wage rate, everybody wants to sort of join the same profession, and then the wage rate goes up, and the wages are going to adjust to equilibrate the market, and so on and so forth. That's a different separate story. But what is important here to note is that whatever is my wage distribution, PT is the proportion of people who are have a preference for to become scientists. Now imagine I said that scientists also have an externality in the sense that they create a knowledge base which stays there for posterity. Which means that in any economy where there are, in here, nobody is spending time anymore, which means the P and P1 minus T is maintained. But if the P that is being maintained is lower, then that means that society is going to have a lower number of scientists forever. And if they're going to have lower number of scientists, they're going to have a lower growth rate forever. And this is in that sense that there can be culture, initial cultural trait can have a longer shadow. The culture has stopped to become important because nobody is spending time, wage rate has gone up. But then the growth rate at which the economy is growing is going to remain tied to the initial population, and that's why culture can have a long shadow. So I'm just going to go to the last slide and just tell you what is the proposition here. The proposition says that the initial distribution of cultural type matters because one profession has a growth implication, the other one not. And therefore, when the wages go higher, that is going to remain crucial for you. So here is the conclusion of the talk, which I have tried to sort of, without going into all the details. Here is the crux of the story of this model, which says that with economic development, as the both set of wages start to go up, economy is growing, wages are growing, cultural transmission stops. Nobody is spending time to inculcate the values. But does that mean influence of culture stops? The answer is no. Because initially, depending on the initial population, the exact distribution of how many are scientist type, how many are corporate type is determined by the initial distribution. And that's going to influence where you are going to stop when the economy goes up. And that is going to determine the stock of knowledge base that you can utilize, and that's going to determine the growth rate. In other words, what this paper shows is that culture may cease to exist. Today we see the population where it seems that nobody is paying attention to the cultural passing on of the cultural traits, but that doesn't mean that culture has disappeared. It's already there in terms of the distribution of the population, and today's distribution actually can be mapped back to the initial distribution of population across various traits. So culture ceases to play a contemporaneous role, but it's still there, casting a long shadow, can still be there, casting a long shadow on the growth process. I'll just stop here and take questions from you. Yes.
Basically, I was working on Kerala's export of nursing culture.
Yes.
Kerala has a dominant, we can also call it a monopoly. Okay. So, what I was looking at, if a girl child engages or get admission in a nursing application, BSc nursing, rather than taking any other occupational choices, that increases her probability of getting employed abroad, and also increases her income, probable expected income by 5 to 8 times. So would that be purely economic choice or culture?
No, this will be both. But in that case, it's almost like your cultural trait and your income trait are going hand in hand, right? So in the sense that I prefer a certain kind of job, and that job is also, let's say, high paying. Then I have a win-win situation. The trade-off comes in when I have a preference for a job and the job is not so high paying. That's when, remember, I know the scientists here are in a way losers because they are saying, I want to become a scientist, even though the scientist pay is lower than the corporate sector pay. I'm willing to take half of that pay. And that's when your cultural belief is kind of giving you an income disadvantage, but you have a sort of implicit utility advantage because I like that anyway. So for the nursing example, those nursing example that nurses are quite, kind of equivalent to the corporates here. The corporates do not have, they're not cutting any their wage income, and their preferences are aligned with their job. So your nurses are like that. Preferences are aligned with the job, and the job is also high paying. Then you are in the best of both worlds. The sort of problem or the conflict between culture and economics comes in if your preference is from some occupation and the market is not paying it that well. So, I'll probably go up to a certain extent, but after that, I have to decide that whether I want to go there or not. And if I don't go there, then the society is going to suffer for that.
And how do you integrate the institutional choice? Institution means states also supporting that particular thing.
So the institution here, this is a free market choice. The institution here, if it cares for people to join the, let's say science profession. Science is just a metaphor. It could be anything. So imagine that there was a nursing, to take your example, imagine that there was a nursing profession, vis-a-vis there was a, let's say school teacher's profession. School teacher profession may be more beneficial for the country because these people are going abroad and their labor is spent abroad. So that's where the trade-off comes in. And if the economic cares for the school teachers, they're not going to stay here because unless you pay them enough, so the state can come in and increase and subsidize and the pay of school teachers. That's one way to directly intervene. And the other way, which is a more roundabout way, is to sort of, try to sort of control this cultural preference. But that's a much, behavioral way, much difficult way. How do I control preferences? How do I change preferences? That's not so easy. But economic incentives can be aligned to the interest of the society, and which then will change the outcome. Simply given your preference, you might be switching back to another, or given the income, you might be switching back to the more beneficial society's point of view, the more beneficial occupation. A state can come in there. Yes.
I had one question. So you have talked about some scholarly jobs and some materialistic jobs. So if it is someday, like someone wants to become an entrepreneur, so it's like it neither falls into two of the categories because it kind of involves some kind of risk. And also, one more thing is that if someone is not influenced by the culture, but suppose they have a talent of doing something, inherent talent, right? So how would that be incorporated into the model, and how would that happen?
Okay, so there are two separate questions. One is that imagine instead of calling it scholarly and materialistic trait, I call it risk preference. How you're a risk taker vis-a-vis you're a risk averse, right? So that can be also a cultural trait. Then the model will, and then imagine that I just reinterpret my model, saying that there are two types, risk averse, risk loving, and there are two occupation, entrepreneurship vis-a-vis government jobs. Just tweak your model. Exactly same outcome will be, so exactly the same. But your second question was about other things, which is more important, and because I've abstracted away from all those other things, I might have a natural skill to become a scientist. I assume anybody can become a scientist, right? That's a very far from reality. So in reality, these cultural traits are going to interact with your innate productivity, and I have made that process silent. If I want to take it to data, I have to somehow distill that cultural trait called Q to your innate probability, innate ability, which is something else. I have assumed that that's unity for everybody. I haven't allowed that to play out.
One more question I wanted to ask. For example, for doctors, we see that it's entirely like someone's parent is a doctor, they are like going to become a doctor. So in that case, can I say that this cultural force is more dominant because
no. So again, there is another set of literature which does not talk about culture but talks about persistence of occupation through economic factors alone. And the economic factors here would be, my father has a doctor and already has certain sort of, whatever cost advantage. He has something associated with an hospital, he has a chamber, clinic and so on and so forth. That's a purely economic advantage. Imagine someone else who doesn't have that, then I have a setup cost advantage because all those things are already there. That's a pure economic argument. Culture has nothing to do with that. Again, I have sort of, assumed away those kind of differences because I said, imagine there's no such barrier, no other barrier other than your preference, then what happens? If you bring in all those barriers, then of course things are going to be sort of different. But then, the question is that to what extent in reality, which forces are operating? Is it cultural forces or economic forces? And those are empirical questions. Thank you. Yes.
To continue with what she said, risk averse is one, risk taking is second, but risk taking pays more. So there might be slight difference.
So imagine that if I'm a risk neutral, so let me take it back. So I'm a risk lover I'm a risk neutral vis-a-vis risk averse. So risk neutral, I look at the expected payoff, I just look at that. Those are like my corporate jobs, and risk averse are people who are saying that, in that case it's negative. No, I don't want to go there. Even though my expected pay is the same, I have an aversion towards that. So those would be exactly similar then.
I just want to add one thing.
Yeah.
In Kahneman's prospect theory.
Sorry?
Prospect theory.
Yeah.
Okay, behavioral economics.
Yeah.
If you are fixing a expected loss scenario, the risk averse individual could behave like a risk. The risk profile changes.
Well, I don't remember that detail of the behavioral economics theories, but I don't know sure of what exactly it translates into. I'm just trying to map that into. So I don't remember exactly Kahneman's behavioral approach towards how they become equivalent. So I won't be able to answer that question right away, but I can look up. I can see. Yeah, sure.
First, thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful lecture. My question is, like we see a certain group of people, they to do a occupation from generations to generations, and so is it because they want to, is it for the culture or values, or is it because of the discriminations we can say, or the poor opportunity they have faced over the time?
Very good question. So my model is just, as I said, it's silent on many important things. One is the ability that she was talking about. There might be innate ability, but this is another thing where there might be some inherent barriers to entering some profession. Remember, I said that in my assumption, there is no barrier. If you want to join a profession, you are free to join a profession. In reality, that's not true. In reality, many people are barred through external constraint, and caste could be one such constraint, discrimination could be one such constraint. Even for women, patriarchal sort of, restriction could be one such constraint where you are not free to choose any profession that you want to choose. So those are probably more in countries like ours, more realistic constraints. But this is just saying that suppose those were not there, even then what your parents teaches you has certain bearing on your choices, and that stays. So even if I remove those constraints, imagine that I do an affirmative action and all that, many of us will probably have this congregate towards one certain occupation because the parents told us these are good occupation, these are not so good occupation, and risky occupation, and so on and so forth.
Good morning.
Yeah.
So my question is, if the parent is unwilling to pass on the cultural trait due to their own experiences in the particular occupation, burnouts, pros and cons, as they have already seen everything. So could we integrate that?
Yes, very good question. Yes, one extension of our paper, we actually allow here, the parents are a bit blinkered by their own cultural values. They want their children to be like them, almost egoistic. And I like this, you also have to, I like you also to be like that. Maybe they go to a profession, they were not more information, or they see that, so that the profession is not so good, or maybe very good, then they change their perception. That sort of kind of, that sort of, then other than my utility function now depends on my experience, and that sort of is a more complicated exercise, but surely an exercise which is an added layer. But many of the results in our model goes through when I sort of, flip my cultural transmission mechanism based on my experience. If I have a good experience, I wanted to pass it on to my child. If it's bad, then it's not. With some probability it's good, some probability it's bad. So I can carry forward the same thing. But that's an interesting question and a good question. We do think about that. That you can flip. Parents can also flip. That Q might change over time. Initially, we were thinking that Q can change by the network effect and peer effect coming to influence the value of the Q. Not that you are carrying forward a Q, but the value of the Q. But then we read the literature, and I thought that network effect they say is separate from intergenerational effect, so we didn't want to confound it.
I see. If I understand this right, there are two different mechanisms that drive this occupational choice. One is this culture, cultural transmission, also through this
Which?
This inverted effect.
Yes.
And the other is the weight, which
Yes. So I didn't talk about the equilibrium setting, but I skipped those slides. But yes. No, they don't, because no. So it depends on the. So that was the other part of the paper, which was saying that imagine that there are very few people, like whatever is the preference structure. In current generation, you find that there are very few of the scientific type, and by cultural preference, they all want to join science profession. But still, the science profession, because there are so few, they are going to, their wage is going to remain high, and then the other type, because the wages remain so high, the other type would also want to become scientists. So in certain situation, when there are very few, wages are going to get equalized. The penalty comes in when you are already very large in number, so you have a lower wage rate. The other people don't want to move in, but you still, because of your cultural baggage, want to be in that profession. That's when the wages are not going to move together, but you are not going to change it because you are happy. Your cultural preference makes you happy. The other guys will never move in because you are earning a lower wage. Why should they move in? And that can become a stable equilibrium. You are going to stay there forever because you are happy with your lower wage, they are happy with their higher wage, and nothing is changing. That also is a possibility. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay, I think it's 11:01, so time is up. Thank you for such interesting question, and thank you for allowing me to present my work to you, and I can take up questions later.
Thank you, Professor Das, for a detailed discussion on the role of culture on growth process. I now request our chair, Professor Saurabh, to please present Professor Das with a memento. I now request Professor Nath to please present Professor Saurabh with a memento. We have arranged for some refreshments. I request everyone please help yourself and be back for the technical session in 15 minutes. The technical sessions will take place in Seminar Hall 5 and Seminar Hall 6.
You're from School of Economics now? Yeah. I just want to ask, you're doing the entire hosting now? the technical session 1 minute just happened to be good. पहले कौन से चलाएगा मुझे भी जिसमें होगा कहाँ जाना
No, we can do it.
पूरे में कहते कौन है
ପାଞ୍ଚଟା ତ ଏଠି ଭର୍ତ୍ତି ଅଛି
उल्टा काटते पड़ो।
उनके पास ये होना चाहिए ना, रीडर नहीं है, माउस का एक्स्ट्रा कहाँ से ऐड
माउस टा कुठले दिस माउस टा आउट
अच्छा उधर लगा,
अरे
उधर
नहीं
लगा।
लगे से
That's right. I try about this.
तो नहीं है
Sorry, 1B.
तो
हाँ चलिए।
Just open it once.
Yeah.
Just go to the last slide. All right.
This is right.
Yes.
All right.
Where's the drive?
The what?
The pen drive.
The pen drive.
Won't be needing it, right?
हाँ एक just का change आसमान
मत देखिए वो कार्य कर लो, ये प्रेजेंटर सेव कर लो।
ठीक है देखो जी
सेटिंग हो क्या मैं अच्छी है
दिक्कत तो नहीं तो थोड़ा अगला मैं तो ये पता है दिक्कत
It's copied, right?
Just a second. Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Man. ଗୋଟେ ଭିଡିଓରେ ଚାରିଟା ତ ଅଛି ତ ହଁ ଠିକ ଅଛି ହଁ
ओके सुना ଯଦି ହେଉଛି ଅନଲାଇନ୍ ଓକେ ସେଇଟା ମେକ୍ ସିଓର କରିବ ଜଣକୁ ରଖିଦେବା ମାଇକ୍ ପାସ୍ କରିବା ପାଇଁ Q&A ପାଇଁ ହେଲା
ତାଙ୍କୁ जो ऑनलाइन जो करिबो मु स्पेशली मेंशन करिबो सब फर्स्ट इंट्रोडक्शन इज विल बी प्रेजेंटिंग ऑनलाइन
ନା ସେଇଟା ତ ଯୋଉ ଯେତିକି ସ୍କ୍ରିପ୍ଟ ଦିଆଯାଇଛି ସେଇଟା
स्क्रिप्ट में लाइक मु करछि जे सेतिर में ऑनलाइन खाली लिखि कहबी ना कहबी ना ऑनलाइन
କହିଦେବ ବାକି ଏଠି ଦୁଇଟା ପିଲାକୁ ଡାକିକି ଚେୟାର ଅଲଗା ଗୋଟେ ଚେୟାର ଡାକିକି ସେ ମ୍ୟାମ୍ ବଟ୍ ଷ୍ଟାର୍ଟିଂରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆନାଉନ୍ସ କରିବ ସେ ଉପରେ ଆସିକି ବସିବେ ଗୋଟେ ଟେବଲ୍ ରହିବ ତାଙ୍କ ନାଁ ଲେଖା ହେଇଛି ଦୁଇଟା ଚେୟାର ପିଲା ଦୁଇଟା
Actually, I did not include references in this PPT. Can I send another one?
Okay. Just set up. Record data upload. Mic check.
अच्छा ये थैंक
ये just confirm कर
ठीक
है
क्या है?
आरुषि
I got it. Okay. And you have a pen drive?
Yeah. Wait.
Oh, sorry. This one. आद्या जो संबित को रखो ना संबित
I don't think it got wait. वीक है क्या बीच में आया था बट अगेन ड्रॉप्ड
संबित इनका एक बार करना तो भी थोड़ा पीपीटी चेंज है उनका बट उसका रीड नहीं हो रहा है
Okay, which one?
the exam presentation. That's what's right.
All the best.
Thank you. So I take out the
Yeah.
लोड करेंगे तो माइक म्यूटेड रहेगा, देखना ठीक है, अनटिल मोशन उनका टर्न है, ठीक है। उधर कर लिए तो रिफ्रेशमेंट ले लियो तो तुम। तो ये सारा तुम यहीं पे बैठ के थोड़ा देखो अभी पीपीटी
फिर मैं स्टार्ट ही कर दे रही मीटिंग, मैम
नहीं,
ज्वाइन
नहीं।
कर लेंगे बाद में, मैं मीटिंग स्टार्ट ही कर दे रही।
ये वन
बी है।
है, वन बी पीपीटी ठीक से देखना, ठीक है, सारा अपलोडेड है।
मेरा फोन था।
आदित्य
यार ये बताओ, ये अमलान कौन है? कौन है? उसको एक बार बोलना मेरे से कोऑर्डिनेट कर दो प्लीज। अमलान एक मिनट। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल टेल मी, सारी पीपीटीज हैं एक बार 1B का इस रूम में 1B होगा। सारी पीपीटीज देख लो, यही जा रहा है ना। अरे मैं मीटिंग स्टार्ट कर रही हूँ
अभी नहीं
अंजलि उधर will be last.
Actually, हो जाए will be last, but she will be attending the entire thing, हाँ. That's why I'm starting.
और शुरू है Associate Professor of Economics, Head of PG Department.
मुझे पेपर
मार्कशीट हाँ मार्कशीट दे दी
अनाउंस करना पड़ देगी मैम को। हाँ सर तुम्हारा The order will be this.
एक सेकंड। हाँ बोलो।
Saket Singh, Saket Bhubaneswar, General Show.
आरुषि सिंह, अंजलि हो जाए, ठीक है। मतलब जो ऑनलाइन वाली है वो एकदम लास्ट में का होगा, बट शी विल बी जॉइनिंग माय एंटायर सेशन ना। तो लिंक तो जा चुका है ना, अंजलि मैम ने कहा। Yeah, don't do this.
confirm करी भी
Zoom is happening only for her.
Only for her. Should I confirm?
Confirm, because I have confirmed Nagmani ma'am yesterday only. She said कि link उनसे जा चुका है। इसलिए just एक बार double check करो।
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome you all to the technical session 1B on the theme Indian economy. In this session, the presenters are Ms. Arushi Singh from South Asian University, Mr. Sanket Bhubaneswar from Ravenshaw University, Mr. Chenniru Savan from University of Hyderabad, and finally Ms. Anjali Oza from Banaras Hindu University, who will be joining online. Dr. Madhubala Satpathy, Associate Professor of Economics and HOD of Postgraduate Department of BJP Autonomous College, Bhubaneswar, will chair the session. I request her to kindly take over the proceedings of the session. Thank you.
एक सेकंड just give me because यार ये कर रही हूँ I'm starting just 2 minutes.
Good morning to all present here. It's a moment of great pride and joy to be here with such young aspirant girls and boys. So thank you, Paramita, for giving me the opportunity to chair this session. So the first participant will be Arushi Singh, South Asian University.
वीडियो में चल
या फिर क्या युवाने के लिए यहाँ क्या करनी है उधर हो गया मधुरा का मैम के पास है
नो मैम के लिए स्टार्ट करनी है
No, they told me to start, no?
ओके
हेलो हेलो सर जूम के लिए कैमरा नहीं चल रहा है
ठीक है
आ रहे हो
सर यार हमारे क्लास में सब क्या बोल
आरुषि सिंह
या
ओके मैनेज करो क्या मैं
दिस
एक सेकंड
कैन आई चेंज इट
yeah you can to this
स्लाइड
Good morning. I am Arushi Singh. I am a PhD scholar at Faculty of Economics, South Asian University. And the paper that I am presenting today is titled, Is Urbanization a Driver of Crime Rates in India? Evidence from State Level Panel Data.
no it's going It's going over here. No, it's working over here. Wait a second. Wait. Don't do it. Wait.
Yeah, so India is, as we all know, rapidly urbanizing, with 35% of its population now living in urban areas. Urbanization, as we all know, drives crime rate, but it may also lead to higher inequality and crime rates. And there are several reasons for it, such as rising anonymity, weaker social cohesion, excess pressure on institutions, as well as infrastructure facilities that are there in urban areas. So, the idea of economics of crime was brought into spotlight by Becker's paper in 1968. The paper talks about how, just like any other rational agent, criminals also do a cost-benefit analysis. They look at the incentives that they have and the cost they have to bear in terms of enforcement. And when they do see that there is a higher opportunity that they are getting, that is when they commit crimes. So, why does this relationship matter? So the idea is that crime does not only lead to social and economic costs, it also affects the growth and investment of a country. It also affects the business environment of a country. And urban safety is very, very crucial for a sustainable development. And thus, we are here exploring this idea. Review of literature. Crime is influenced by socioeconomic factors such as inequality, unemployment, education, and growth, other than urbanization. Here, I'm focusing on urbanization as a central driver, and there have been several studies in developed as well as developing countries that look at urbanization as an important structural determinant of crime. Rapid urbanization may increase crime through various channels, such as migration and youth concentration, weakened informal social control, and rising relative deprivation in urban settings. There have been quite a few studies, even in Indian context, that have tried to look at this relationship, and they've explored crime across states and across regions. However, the literature has largely looked at very specific type of crime rates, such as violent or property crime rates, and the only recent literature has tried to look at broader definitions, but they also do not explicitly try to examine urbanization. There are three important contributions of this paper. This paper uses recent post-2018 state-level data of crime, urbanization, and socioeconomic factors to capture contemporary trends in India. It incorporates urbanization as a central determinant, addressing a gap in recent literature that largely overlooks urban transition. It also employs rigorous panel econometric methods to account for unobserved heterogeneity and endogeneity. So the methodology that we are following here is as follows. We here have state-level panel data, which is trying to also take into account the fact that we have a potential urbanization, potential endogeneity that exists between urbanization and crime. Because intuitively, if you think about it, when there is a very high crime rate in an area, you would see that lesser opportunities might come up because people may be afraid to invest in businesses, and that might lead to a lower urbanization. So we expect certain endogeneity, and then we test that endogeneity using the Urban-Wu-Hausman test. And given that the presence of endogeneity, we have followed instrumental variable approach here. The instrument that I'm using is lagged urbanization because it is strongly correlated with current urbanization, but not contemporaneously affected by the crime rate of the present period. So the main specification, therefore, that I'm using is instrumental variable random effects model. It accounts for unobserved state heterogeneity and both within state and between state variation. And for this paper, all the diagnostic tests of endogeneity, heteroscedasticity, and autocorrelations have been conducted. And following that, robust standard errors have been incorporated. this is the main estimating equation. We can see that crime is our dependent variable, and urbanization along with other socioeconomic controls is our independent variable, and we are taking into account the unobserved state effects. And similarly, we have the instrumental variable specification where lag urbanization is a determinant of urbanization. So these are the data sources that I'm using. The analysis period is from 2018 to 2023, and there you can see that I've used multiple data sources that are listed here. This is a graphical illustration of the urbanization and crime relationship. We can see that there is a positive and increasing relationship. As urbanization is increasing, we see an increase in crime rates. But given the fact that this can be only due to correlation also, we further conduct econometric analysis. As already explained, I'm using the instrumental variable random effects model, and the results are as follows. Urbanization as well as inflation are seen as positive and significant determinant of crime rates, and police expenditure is seen as a negative and significant determinant. So, and here, as you can see, I'm using secondary education as well as unemployment rate as control, and even after controlling for that, our variables remain significant. So, the mechanism linking urbanization and crime. Rapid urbanization creates infrastructure and policing pressure. Urban areas exhibit higher visible inequality and relative deprivation. Decline in social cohesion and informal social control in cities leads to higher crime rates. Moreover, there is a greater anonymity and there are more lucrative targets because of higher GDP per capita in urban areas, which incentivizes more crime rates. Policy recommendations. As you can see, strengthening policing and investing in police infrastructure remains essential. However, enforcement alone is insufficient. Therefore, reducing crime requires managing social consequences of crime. And there is a need for inclusive urban development policies which address inequality in opportunities and income disparities. These are the references that I am using. Thank you.
ये दोनों अलग अलग क्यों चल रहे हैं? ये तो चल ही नहीं रहा है, वही चल रहा है।
ये किसका है?
ये आईसी का है। हाँ, बुआ इतनी देर से नहीं, प्लीज कर दीजिए।
Hi, so my question is like, is crime or the underground economics like is an indicator of weak institution or weak economy? So, and what comes first?
Is crime an indicator of weak institutions?
Or a weak economy?
So, when you look at the rapid urbanization that we are seeing in our country, you can see that given that there's a lot of rural to urban migration which happens in expectance of job market, that you will get better jobs here as compared to doing just agriculture back in the rural areas. But when you come here, there are not so many opportunities. So people end up being absorbed in the informal market. So when they're absorbed more in the informal market, there are also other channels that they take up because of the loss of opportunities. So yes, I would say that because of the weaker institutions, because there are not enough jobs that are getting created, that are absorbing these people who have actually come here for employment, and that is why they then move on to a rather illegal ways of earning money. And as you can see, we also see that inflation leads to a higher crime rates, and that shows that in areas when you're, for example, when there was COVID and there are people having less jobs, but even if the prices are higher, they are not able to afford what they were already being able to afford. So then they have to, in order to fulfill their demands, they have to move towards other illegal sources of money. So that corresponds to Becker's idea, which talks about when people see that the like the cost that is there, but the cost in terms of enforcement, that are the institutions that we are talking about. For example, if police, there is police, but if they're not able to say the charge sheeting rate is low and or conviction is low, and they're not able to, like if the criminals feel that I might gain much more by just getting like doing theft or property crimes, all of that, I will gain much more than I'll be ready to take the risk. So people do that. So yes, we do need stronger institutions and stronger infrastructure to support more opportunities.
And also, do you think that the dark economy or the underground economy is more stable than our current economy, which is going on in the globe?
The underground economy is more stable.
Yes.
See, I wouldn't say it's more stable. We are always trying to make the formal economy better, but as we know that recently we are also using data that are actually inculcating the informal job market and all of that. More and more it's not formalization, but like more data is being collected, and you're making it more digital. I think that is going to help us make our formal as well as informal economy stronger, and that might lead to lowering of the underground economy strength. Yes, ma'am.
I expected you to explain properly those.
Okay.
Because students will not be able to.
All right. Yeah. Actually, I thought that 15 minutes is there. So yes. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll get back to that. Yeah.
Just asking you, what role does the floating population?
Sorry?
Floating population.
Yes.
Play in the criminal landscape of Indian cities?
As in the migrating populations. Yes. So, ma'am, the idea is similar to what you were talking about, the informal economy. What we see is that there is a rather, even in this, we have network effects that operate. For example, if there is an individual that is already settled in an urban area, and we have, from there, they have some people who are coming from the rural areas. So there's a network that is there, they can help them get jobs. But for people who just come here, who just migrate without having an opportunities, they are unfortunately often pushed into these areas. I would not say that that's the intention with which they come, but given the lack of opportunities, they have the floating population has to a lot of times get into and abide into these areas.
Just tell me, what about these rural areas?
Yes.
Crime rate in rural areas?
Ma'am, yeah, no, actually the crime is there, but with urbanization, the crime is rising that we see in our data, and so there is, of course, a reason that there is better tracking that happens in urban areas because there are more policing and there are more infrastructure. But the fact that there is rising anonymity when individuals move into city areas, they're less likely to be caught. Plus, there is lesser informal Durkheim's idea that talks about organic solidarity and mechanical solidarity. That's what we see here. That the organic solidarity breaks down in urban areas. People do not have the same kind of informal social control that exists in rural areas, because of which people in rural areas often commit less crime, because it's not just about getting into jail, it's also about their respect, it's about their honor. So that also has an influence. The social cohesion has a lot of influence, and because of that, the kind of crimes and the intensity of crime differs in rural areas.
So the informal and anonymous nature of city life reduce the social pressure that prevents crime rate in rural areas.
Yeah, I don't know if I should call it social pressure. I would say basically the kind of cohesion, the kind of oneness that people feel in rural areas, that people. There's also a fear factor, like these people, you are already aware in urban areas, say someone would just do some theft, and because there's so much crowd and there's a very high chance of staying anonymous after doing that. People are able to escape it more, and yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Zoom में नहीं चलेगा ना? नहीं नहीं यूट्यूब भी मैं कर दे रही, आप यूट्यूब भी रहने दीजिए.
Ma'am, I would say what I see is economic disparity, because even if population density was higher, if we had enough opportunities and lesser inequality, I think that would get tackled automatically. But given that there is a lot of disparity and it's visible, the demonstration effect, people want to, have whatever the richer population is having, those kinds of things, and the persistent visible inequality always leads to higher crime rates. So I would say economic disparity.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if you go to your econometric model, you have panel data, right?
Yes.
Wait.
You have individual crime data?
Ma'am, state level.
State level.
Yes.
Okay. So I think there should be some more controls that should be there, and also the instrumental variable you have taken is what have you taken?
Ma'am, I've taken land urbanization.
Urbanization rate. So urbanization rate has some relation with inflation and some other independent variables also.
Ma'am, I've checked for correlation, and I've only kept the variables that have like lower than 0.5 or rather lower than 0.4 correlation here. So inflation accounted only after taking in account that. Plus here, because we are taking lag urbanization, as we know the nature of instrumental variable. For this period, of course, the crime rate does not get impacted by the lag urbanization. Lag urbanization does not get impacted by the crime rate of the present period, and it does get impacted by the urbanization itself. So that's how I have chosen.
What is the time period of your data?
2018 to 2023.
And for all the states?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So you should have mentioned the source here. What is it? Your source?
I'm so sorry, ma'am. Yeah, this is all. Yeah, that's my own calculation. I should have mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a second. Can you?
Yeah. Just a second.
Yeah, so about explaining the model. So here I've taken crime rate as my dependent variable. We are trying to explore how there are several factors that affect crime rates. So here on the left-hand side, you will see that crime rate has been taken with the suffix of I and T. I stands for the states and T stands for time. So we are looking at every state in the time period of 2018 to 2023. And we have urbanization as our variable with beta 1 as its coefficient. The beta 1 tells about how much of your urbanization affects your crime rates, and we have seen in the next slide that the value is 9.22. So it explains that an increase in urbanization rate by 1% leads to an increase in crime rate by 9.22%. And anxiety here is a vector of all the other socioeconomic variables that we are taking. Specifically, here I've taken inflation. Yeah. So remove this.
I'll just just
Cartoon answer.
I'm going without the slide, so it's fine. Without slideshow
Okay,
is
yeah,
fine.
yeah. So yeah, here you'll see that crime rate is there, urbanization, unemployment, inflation, education, and police expenditure. These are all the independent variables that we are taking, and we are trying to see how these variables affect the crime rates. And so, ma'am, I've taken GDP per capita also, but because there's a very high correlation between this and the urbanization rate, so I've dropped it from the model. And so, yeah, going back to the model. So, yeah, so you see, then XIT is your socioeconomic controls that we just listed, and UIT is your unobserved state effects, which is basically when we are looking at a panel data model and using a random effects, we are saying that we are controlling for the unobserved state effects, such as the characteristics, such as, for example, uh, Maharashtra may have certain cultural and historical institutions that differ from Bihar, and therefore that kind of things stay constant over time, but are different for every state, and those are what are known as state unobserved state effects. And here we are controlling for that so that we can remove those and focus solely on the impact of the variables that we are taking into account. And yeah. Yes, so yeah, so that's, and then error term, as you all know, is the residual of whatever variables that may have not been inculcating in explains that. So yeah, that's the model that we have taken here. Lagged urbanization, again, that is the instrumental variable specification that we have taken. And for that, lagged urbanization here is your independent variable that is impacting the urbanization variable. And the way instrumental variable acts is that you have to take another variable in its place, which specifically tells you that it does not have any connection with the original dependent variable of your question, and it impacts it only through the variable that you're replacing. So that's how instrumental variable approach works. I think that's all for the model. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Arushi. The next one, Sanket Bohidar, Bhubaneswar University. Agricultural development, structural capacity, and high value crop potential in Odisha. A district level composite index analysis.
Full slide.
Full slide.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm Sanket Bohidar from Bhubaneswar University. I'm currently working as a research scholar in Department of Economics. So, this is today's topic that we're going to discuss now. Agricultural development, structural capacity, high value crop potential in Odisha, the district level composite index analysis. So summarizing my introduction first, like we know that agriculture in India, or specifically also in Odisha, it is a very central livelihood to a lot of people, as a lot of people's employment depends on agriculture. So what we speak about is that coming back to the topic that since 1990s we have seen India's agriculture has been increasingly diversifying from the traditional crops to the high value crops such as the vegetable we say, spices we say, or we say, towards the horticulture. And as we know as well that high value crops generate more income to the farmers due to the labor intensive nature of that. But what we need to discuss here is, despite it has a lot of potential, it has a lot of constraints as well, and those constraints, that is something that we will be discussing today. As also discussed by Professor Birtar or Gulati, will find this And they have also highlighted this access to irrigation, we say, rural road connectivity, we will say, credit everything as such a constant that is harming this high value crop potential. So basically, what are the research gaps that we will discuss again? So a lot of existing studies in agriculture will find that they have been discussing about the yield based analysis or the production based analysis. So here we will go more more infrastructure. What are the influencing factors that affect the agricultural performance? That we will discuss particularly. As we know that in the context of Odisha as well, a very sharp interdistrict variation we will find also in irrigation coverage, input use, institutional penetration as well. So against this backdrop, this study builds a composite index to understand it. So so before beginning, let's discuss a bit about the history and the institution. What we have seen over the years. This report is particularly from the 5 decades of agricultural statistics of Odisha. Over the last 50 years, particularly from 1970s to 2020, what development that have taken place over the time. So basically, what we are seeing that this food grain production has rose over the time. Also, but despite this progress, what we have seen from that report as well, that this has been structurally very uneven across the districts of Odisha. We have 30 districts. This development has been structurally uneven, as reported by Odisha Economic Survey as well as the 5 decades of agricultural statistics as well. As the coastal districts, still continue to record higher cropping intensity, stronger production outcomes, reflecting the cumulative structural advantages here. Now we'll discuss the political economy part in this context particularly, as it is very important to understand the role of institutions as well. As Sarkar Mukherjee already told about this thing that Odisha has constantly recorded lower crop yields or weaker irrigation development that is even across the districts. So it has a history as well. We cannot say these results are very current shocks of this. The history, we can tell that the colonial land revenue system, we can say, or the post-independence underinvestment in agriculture specifically as well. That is the influencing factor. So since agriculture, is a sector that has half of the population that are working in agriculture in rural areas of Odisha, so we'll find this widening regional inequality particularly that we are going to discuss now, like the tribal or Western Odisha district, despite the welfare improvements, continue to face the structural deficits now. As we go back to history, the construction of Western Odisha Development Council back in 1998 or the Biju KBK plan back in 2006 or 7, even after that we will see through the index what has happened over the last decade, whether these plans or in the targeted regions have worked or not. So these are my data particularly. So we will again I will give a brief about my data. So basically, we have taken the yield of some particular crop that I am already mentioning is a high value crop, particularly vegetables, spices, oilseeds, millets. The data is from 2015 to 2024. That is from these are my data sources as well. You can go through. I'm not repeating it again. The cropping intensity, irrigation intensity, fertilizer consumption, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana that has started from 2018 again. The rural bank branches, road length or that is constructed from the Pradhan Mantri Gramya Sadak Yojana, and the warehouse capacity. So since there are a lot of variables and not all the variables have the same time period, we will say. So that is why we have used a temporal averaging strategy particularly to smooth that. So the reference period of most of the variables are 10 years. Whereas for the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, as it started from 2018 itself, that is how we are taking it from 2018 to 2024. So is the road length that is given as reported in the sites from 2016 to 2024 again. And these two variables, rural bank branches and warehouse capacity, as we found from the report of 2024, that is we have that is the data we have taken. So this is the again what I have already mentioned, how I have temporarily averaged these variables. This is the slide about this. I am not repeating again this thing. So what is the methodology particularly? How we have constructed this index that we are going to discuss now. So this study construct a composite agricultural development index basically using the Sudarshan Iyengar methodology back then in 1982 when they have published their methodology in EPW, a method of classifying the regions from multivariate data. So that particular methodology we have used here. And so instead of this indicators, all the indicators, 8 indicators I have discussed, instead of weighing them endogenous, weighing them like arbitrarily, we are using this particular method here. So what this method follows? First, the normalization of indicator, derivation of the weights, and then aggregation into a composite index. So we will begin with this. This is what first we will find the normalized value of all the indicators across the districts. This is the original value. As you can see, and there is a maximum and minimum. Then going forward, why it is different from the equal weight index method or different index we are using, that I will explain here. That first thing, the small signal we are seeing here, there is a standard deviation of the Z value we are taking. But as the indicators with a very higher variability often dominates a particular composite value in the end. That is what we have done here is for this to mitigate this effect, weights are defined as the inverse of the standard deviation that we have taken 1 by small sigma. And to ensure the weight sum to unity, as from the 1 we will calculate the weights, that we have taken the constant k. The final weight assigned is k into 1 by small sigma. After that, this is the composite index particularly, and defining it again, the CADI that represents the composite index for the value of the district I, and WJ denotes the weight of indicator, and ZI is the normalized value of the indicator. Again, so all the weights have been taken from the Sudarshan Iyengar. The value remains between 0 to 1, and the higher value that that will show the stronger structural agricultural capacity. So from here on, I will narrate a story and we will go deeper into that study basically one by one. What we have found now, these are the results and the discussion that we will go. So these are the ranking of the districts from the index methodology what we have already made. We'll find some of the top districts, we'll find some of the bottom districts here over all these indicators what we have taken. That we can go through. Again, I've taken this bar chart as well to understand it better. But why it is important to understand now? We will understand it from this. So this is the result, particularly just mentioning it. Bargarh, Ganjam, Puri, or Cuttack will say emerge as the top performers, whereas districts like Kandhamal and Jharsuguda, Raigad, they occupy the lower ranking. But why they occupy the lower ranking, that we will discuss now. So this is the clustering probably. We can see through this GIS map basically. What clustering we will find that the coastal region we see very dark colored you will find here. Ganjam, Puri, Jagatsinghpur, Kendrapada, Jajpur, Cuttack, they are performing exceedingly well. That is, we can say the coastal regions or the coastal agroclimatic regions, they are performing exceedingly well. Whereas the performance of the other agroclimatic regions are very scattered in nature. We see whether a Kalahandi or a Bargarh or Mayurbhanj, we will find very scattered nature of the development there. So this is the agroclimatic zone divide as well. What I have done here is the coastal Odisha. We will find whether the northeastern coastal plain or the east-southern coastal plain. We will find a lot of top performing districts are coming under that zone. Almost 5 or 6 districts we will find here. When we go back to the Western Odisha, most of the central tableland or the plateau, will find very few districts are performing well. Some are in the transition phase and some are not performing well. More concerning part, again, we will see, as we have again discussed from the political economy thing, this southern and tribal regions of Odisha, you will find, except Mayur, as it is a northern part of Odisha basically, we find Koraput, Nabrangpur, Malkangiri, Kandhamal, Raigad, Gajapati. All these districts have not been performing well, and this is not because of a certain current shock or this climate shock, but this is rather a very we can say the structural underinvestment over the time. Since we have already discussed about the establishment of Western Odisha Development Council, we say, or the Biju KVK plan back then in 2006, we say. Still, they are not performing as of now. It is a result of last decade, what we say. So this is the result basically. The top performing districts very concentrated around the coastal regions or the near coastal regions, where they have the access to irrigation infrastructure, market connectivity, whereas the lower districts will find very high dependence on the rain-fed agriculture with no established irrigation system that we will find there, and weaker institutional penetration there. That will know better from the indicator-wise contribution to this district basically. Yeah. So this is what we. So how the indicator contribute to this particular composite index of all the districts. That is again a very important part to understand as well. So we'll find here Bargarh, Ganjam or Puri. We will see a lot of indicators are equally contributing them to go to a higher state or a more developed agricultural region. You will find all the variables, whether it is a yield of high value crops or insurance you will find, or the cropping intensity, road length, everything. Whereas when we see this, like middle 10 districts, that again you will find some of the variable are in very transition phase and not improved over the time, and some are improving over the time. So they are moving towards the convergence we will find. But the concerning part here is our last 10 districts. What we will see here, that you will find the irrigation intensity variable. If we can go through that, we will find here that such kind of penetration that is very scattered in nature itself, where a lot of districts are not getting the assured irrigation. And again, in most of the market variables we say, or the institutional variables we will say, they have not worked properly there. So this is the result of that when we decompose these indicators, particularly what we find again, the Bargarh, Puri, Ganjam, they show a strong contribution from the irrigation intensity, cropping intensity, road connectivity. So when you have a high value crop potential, even you have a very fertile land that has a very good capacity to grow the high value crop, but this whole issue of high value crops is the post market or the post harvest mechanism actually. Since if a district if they don't have the storage infrastructure, the good road connectivity, the potential will be lost actually, so that they won't be able to grow the high value crop. Let's just take an example of Kandhamal. If I say they have a very good potential in growing GI tech haladi, but this turmeric, but this issue with them is the connectivity, irrigation, and what we will say is the storage infrastructure. What are the structural drivers and structural constant basically? Again, I have discussed already whether we will say irrigation or cropping intensity or the market infrastructure. So the strong institution penetrate in these regions basically. So the rural banking as well, this institutional credit mechanism as well, that is also a part. But in contrast, the lower performing districts remain constant by overlapping deficit, not just one deficit, but the deficit keep on overlapping on them. So they are not able to grow as much as they want. So this is my conclusion basically. As what we found basically as the coastal and near coastal districts again performing higher up over the time. as they have the balance strength across multiple dimensions or multiple indicators, what we will say. In contrast, the low-performing districts face overlapping constant, as we have already discussed. So the structural deficit basically, limit the diversification of high-value crops, as they are in nature are very perishable goods. Basically, the high-value crops, we take the example of vegetables we say, or the spices we say. So for the perishable nature, we need to counter it through the institutional mechanism or the institutional penetration. So what we required basically, the district constantly ranked in the bottom category, mainly the southern and tribal region, require focused policy attention. Also, irrigation intensity emerges a very critical determinant over all the indicators we will find here. That it is a prerequisite for the high value crops adoption in low performing districts. Variation are very scattered. The projects have, even if they have not been implemented properly. Also, the institutional access, rural banking density, all these variables when work as a balanced. Yeah. Thank you. Just for the robustness check, we have compared it with the equal weight indicators as well. What we have found from the rank correlation, that the p value is almost 0.99. So this is not just a, what I will say is index. Due to this index, these results are coming. Rather, it is almost similar if we take the equal weights. Thank you so much.
Any questions?
इसको close कर सकते
हाँ, इसको close कर दीजिए। इसको भी कर दीजिए। इसको। Just like you mentioned that in the central area of Odisha, like Angol and those industrial areas, you mentioned that they have very low agriculture.
Yeah. No, not low agriculture.
That their output is very low and they have very low standards in agriculture.
Yeah.
But can you please justify that why? Because in the industrial areas specifically, Angol doesn't play a very good thing because it's a very industrial area.
Yeah.
And that affects the agriculture very much.
Definitely, that affects the agriculture. Even in the literature, I have mentioned about this Bhubaneswar Sahu and Senapati paper as well. When the investment has taken place over the time as well, most of the investments were on the industrial development, even during that period of time as well. That is why agriculture has faced not just the issue of disparity, or we will say unequalness, but rather underinvestment as well. That issue is there in a lot of districts as well.
Sanket, it was a good deliberation. Just tell me, how does structural capacity influence a district's ability to shift toward high value crops?
Yeah. So how does it affect? We say, like in high value crops particularly is such a kind of a issue that like the traditional crops of paddy or something we say. The kind of infrastructure we need for the high value crops, it is very high. So they have to be structurally implemented. So not just the irrigation, that is, we can say the pre-harvest mechanism that helps in, but rather the post-harvest mechanism that the institute should provide, like I will say a warehouse facility to them, or we will say the proper road connectivity to them, or more credit as it requires more investment in agriculture. We should provide more bank facility to them so that they can have the institutional credit rather than getting the loop into that middleman credit and all these issues. So that is why this proper structural capacity of a lot of cumulative variables is required to shift from diversification to hybrid.
Can you highlight on district-specific strategies to enhance high-value crops and farmers' income?
Yeah. So basically, the district-specific strategy, I think. Again, the agroclimatic behavior, this results show this thing as well.
Yes, you want to pick it.
So again, so again, so this shows as well. So you'll find here most of the highlands or the ghats are the regions where they have performed, in low capacity basically. So these regions, the strategy should be different, particularly uh, as we find the road connectivity issue they are still facing in most of the highlands region, as they are cumulatively performing low. We will find here. Again, the other issue is the irrigation, and as I have already mentioned in the paper that we will find in lot of the districts the irrigation to all the regions, all the blocks have not yet been provided. Where in very contrast to this, if we take the case of Puri, suppose, we'll find that if we go through all the blocks across, they are doing the what we call both Rabi and Kharif crops. So basically, again, the two season agriculture basically pushing them to stay in their region and work on agriculture rather than these regions where the Rabi has no proper cropping facilities. That is why they have to migrate, to different regions to earn something.
Any other questions from the audience?
I have a question. So, do you think just structural changes are enough for agricultural development and policy formulation has no effect on it?
Definitely. No, I do not think the structural changes are enough. As I've already mentioned, this has a very political economic aspect as well, because the part dependence is very much affected by the policies as well. But when the policies will be framed, actually, if we talk about the yield or the production based analysis, the policies will be focused toward the yield and production based analysis. If we take the multi-dimensional issue, then the policies probably will focus on where the yield is good, the lands are fertile, but why they are not able to get into that potential? That is where probably this a multi-dimensional work will help them to structure a policy so that they can not just focus on irrigation, but rather they would focus on the warehouses as well, or the marketing mechanism as well. So that would be solved. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanket.
Shravan. This is the one. You can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Shravan, pursuing PhD under the supervision of Professor Pragya Paramita Mishra from the School of Economics, University of Hyderabad. And what I'll be presenting today is a part of my objectives from my PhD, titled Examining the Effect of International Species Trade on the Biodiversity of India. So, if you look at research on trade environment linkages in the previous decade, it has evolved to a very large extent. You think about pollution havens, for example, wherein there's a differentiation between less polluting and more polluting countries. Then you also have the environmental Kuznets curve effects being decomposed into scale effect, composition effect, and technique effect, wherein you basically see how the environment trade relationships actually try to change income levels or the composition of the goods traded, or also in terms of innovation. And you also have the microeconomic theory of externalities, where you're trying to look at how trade affects the environment from the point of view of the importers, the consumers, the producers, the exporters. So with that, one particular type of commodity that is being traded extensively in the international arena is species. So international species trade, or the it also refers to the cross-country exchange of floral and faunal species, which is becoming increasingly prevalent over the years. So it contains both live and non-live species. By non-live species, I imply the products derived from the species, like skin or hides. So according to the United Nations Environment Program, about 1.3 billion individual plants and animals have been traded in the previous decade. And needless to say that a major impact of trading species across the borders is on the biodiversity. So think of it like this, that if you want to export species from one country to another, that means you're extracting that particular species from a particular biome or a habitat where that particular species cultivates or grows. So because of that kind of extraction, species loss is pretty much likely. That is from the point of view of the exporters. Now if you think from the point of view of the importers, there's a danger of importing invasive or alien species, which try to be over-consumptive in nature when they get into the host country and could damage the host ecosystem, the importing country's ecosystem. So there are impacts on biodiversity. So I'm like, one particular concept which could actually explain the IST, International Species Trade and Biodiversity relationship is, one is biotrade and the other is also biotrade. These two concepts were conceptualized in the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. So that I will refer to the first one as capital biotrade and the small one as like small biotrade. So capital biotrade refers to trade in biodiversity related products which take into account environmental sustainability concerns, like whether trade in biodiversity products is ensuring biodiversity protection. That's taken care of by the capital biotrade. The small biotrade also refers to trade in biodiversity-oriented products. However, they do not put emphasis on the environmental concerns associated with trading the species. I mean, the biodiversity products, in which species is one part. Now, coming to the review of literature, the broad themes that I discovered while looking for literature on this IST biodiversity relationship, one of them is pathological transmissions happening as a result of cross-country trade. Then species loss as a result of either extraction or this one is related to extraction only. Then I come to invasive species, which try to invade and destroy the host importing country's ecosystem. And finally, also like if there are concerns to biodiversity, how different kind of measures can help curb the same. You have trade ban, which could be at least in the literature mostly in the form of tariffs or quotas limiting the quantity of species or putting a higher price on the species traded. And you also have some regulations within the refers to the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species, which monitors the global trade in flora and fauna. So, while literature on regional trade in species is well established, that between the trade of species across the national borders, the countries, between countries, and their impacts on the biodiversity has not been that well explored, especially in the context of a higher biodiverse country like India. It's like one among the 17 mega biodiverse regions in the world, which is why I've taken this area. So my objective is to examine the relationship between international species trade of live species and biodiversity in India, using the conceptual framework of capital biotrade and small biotrade. My time period is from 1995 to 2022. Why? Because the biodiversity indicator, that is my dependent variable, was derived from the Environmental Performance Index. The data for which starts from 1995. And the reason why 2022 is my last period is because the data CITES has a database. Okay, it has a database which records data on floral and faunal trade, and in its manual, it is recommended that the data for the recent 3 years be excluded on account of the fact that there is a large level of updation that happens. That is why I have not taken 2023, 4 or 5. Terms of trade is live because that database contains trade not only in live species but also non-live species. That is the derivative products, and these derivative products have got different units of measurement. Some are measured in terms of boxes, some are measured in terms of bottles. So that would make the analysis a little difficult. So for simplicity, I have taken only live species. So when I say live species, I mean the species traded are counted in terms of the actual numbers. So for example, if you see the number 100 beside lions, That means 100 lines have been either exported or imported, which will be indicated over there. So it's absolute number. These are my variables. Coming to my dependent variable, I have the biodiversity index, which I constructed from the environmental performance index. I have the 4 indicators within that EPI that I have taken up: protected areas representativeness, species habitat, species protection, and terrestrial bioprotection. Coming to my main independent variables, on the one hand, I have total live species export, which is the sum of floral and faunal live species exported, and total live species import, referring to the number of floral and faunal live species imported. So then I also have gross domestic product, which in the literature I have seen has has explained biodiversity enhancement or degradation to a large extent. So I have taken that, and I have taken weighted tariff on primary products as an indicator of trade policy, because the weighted tariff on primary products also includes trade on live species as well. Then coming to the methods, I've used principal component analysis to construct the biodiversity index from the various indicators I took from the environmental performance index. So basically what it does is it reduces the dimensionality and tries to, it's very useful for constructing indices. Then as it's a simple time series analysis. So I've checked for stationarity and co-integration. Stationarity refers to a condition wherein a particular time series variable is invariant, has an invariant mean or variance. So I've used augmented diffuser and Phillips Perron test. Then I've also checked for co-integration, implying causal relationship among the variables, or statistically speaking, if you have two variables with unit, root, or non-stationarity as a linear combination, they exhibit stationarity. So that is co-integration. Then for estimation, my focus has been on causality part. So I have taken a vector auto-regression model wherein all variables are treated as endogenous, since the objective is to establish causality. I've also used impulse response function in order to look at the effects of the shocks. So basically, if you give shock to one of the independent variables, what is happening to the biodiversity index? Then for post estimation, I've used IG value stability, residual autocorrelation, and normality. This is the vector of equation to both the equations. The first one I'm referring to as the export model, the second one the import model, because the export variable is important in the first one and the import one is the second one. Descriptive statistics. Then coming to the stationarity test, except for species export and tariff on primary products, all other variables are integrated of order 1, implying non-stationarity. However, when it came to co-integration, I could not find any evidence for co-integration, which necessitated me to use the vector auto-regression model. So over here, while I see unidirectional causality from biodiversity index to total life species export, a negative causality, I do not see a reverse causality. So if I have to say that India's species trade is capital biotrade, that is, it is environmentally sustainable, there should be a bidirectional causality between the two, but it's not the case. Also, I see causality in terms of GDP as well, like biodiversity to GDP, then species exports to GDP, as well as past value of GDP to its GDP. Why? Because an autoregressive model tries to show how the value of a particular variable changes with respect to change in its land, right? So over here, I cannot say that. All I can say is there is unidirectional causality from biodiversity index to total life species exports. However, when it comes to import, the model 2, there is no causality at all, either between biodiversity index or import, or from import to biodiversity. Then coming to the impulse response function, over here the shock is given to each of the lags of the independent variable, and the response is to the dependent variable. So basically, what happens is, the shocks would be either transitory or permanent. So in this case, most of the shocks are like kind of transitory, because especially if you look at bottom left, GDP constant prices to index, there is just a small transitory shock, negative shock. However, later it tries to get a little, the transitory shock dissipates. However, when I look at the second model, the import model, from past value index to the current value of the index, if you look top left, that shock is like quite permanent. It's not dissipating immediately, unlike the other three quadrants. I also checked, I'm sorry I was unable to show the stability, eigenvalue value stability test. For some reason, the figure was not appearing. However, all eigenvalues values are within the unit modulus. Coming to residual autocorrelation test, first lag show autocorrelation. However, from the second lag, there is no evidence of autocorrelation. Coming to the normality test, the first model, the export model, tries to show, shows that, the variables are fairly normal. I cannot say the same for the second model, the import model. So with that, the conclusion is that increased biodiversity conservation leading to reduced live species export, possibly because with increased emphasis on conservation, trade might be limited where there is unidirectional causality. Then trade policy has a positive causality towards India's biodiversity, which could mean that the moment you increase the weighted tariff on primary products, trade is being reduced, standard trade policy theory, and which is basically preserving enhancing the index in terms of causality. However, because there is only unidirectional causality from biodiversity to exports, also because there is no causality between imports and biodiversity, it is inconclusive whether India's international species trade tends towards biotrade or not. Coming to the limitations, I'm only considering live species, ignoring non-live species product because of their different units of measurement, so I'm planning to work on this. Also, there are limited indicators of India's biodiversity as reflected in the index. For example, you have biodiversity in habitat is one category within the ecosystem vitality indicator of that environmental performance index. It also has other indicators like forest, for example, or agriculture, for example, which could be very useful to monitor, floral trade. Then there's also need for inter-country comparison. This is part of my second objective of my PhD, where I'm trying to compare this IST biodiversity relationship among the major trading countries with India. Also, because I found unit truth in some of my variables, and yet the co-integration test did not give me any evidence of co-integration, I've been suggested that an error correction model would be a better choice to which is normally used in case of co-integration in order to separate the long run and the short run effects due to the unit root problem. Also, while this is not part of the manuscript I submitted, I thought let me look at the multiple country scenario which I showed in the limitations. So here I took these are the countries that I took based on the net export with India in terms of magnitude. I used cross-sectional dependence test in order to run a parallel regression. Then fixed effects, random effects model as well, and all the estimates are corrected for heteroscedasticity and autocorrelation. And to look at which of the two estimates, fixed or random effects, are better, I also use Hoffman test. So over here, I see that export is positively influencing. So basically, the equation is the same. You have biodiversity index on the left-hand side as a dependent variable, and just the model. The model specification is the same. So here, live species export is positively influencing biodiversity index. So it could be said that trade in live species is actually like environmentally sustainable or capital biotrade. Also, GDP is positively influencing biodiversity index, and however, weighted tariff on trade policy is negatively impacting biodiversity index. This could be due to the fact that even if you levy trade on primary products, sites only takes into account the legal trade part. There could also be illegal trade aspect, which is captured by the seizures data available in sites. So that might be one reason. However, import is not significant, even though import has a positive effect on biodiversity index, it's not significant. So I do not think I can conclude that importing species is capital biotrade. So live species export benefit from the second analysis, it is benefiting countries' biodiversity, indicating that international species trade and export is biotrade related. It is inconclusive whether live species import is affecting countries' biodiversity. And since trade policy is having, weighted tariff on primary products is negatively influencing biodiversity index, it may need to be modified further so that it will positively influence biodiversity. So with that, I conclude my presentation and I invite any questions, comments, and suggestions for further improvement given the fundamental limitations of the paper. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
That part, co-integration.
Okay.
that. This one, right? This? Yes. So, what is TLAC? I have missed that part. What is TLAC?
Total life species exports.
Okay. And BI is?
Biodiversity index.
Okay. Okay. So you can see by ADF test or PP test, not all of them are integrated of order 1, right?
Yes, that was highlighted earlier.
How did you conduct the co-integration test in that case?
Because if a vector auto-regression model has to be run, co-integration cannot be present among the variables. That is why I try to check it despite the presence of the unit root.
Yeah, so I think anyway, for deciding about the order of the VAR model, co-integration is okay, but co-integration cannot happen with I0 variables. Just make a note of it. So it's not necessary to present this result. Okay. Okay, fine. That's all.
But is VAR like permissible when? I mean, this kind of issue.
Deciding the order of the VAR, you have to find out the order of the VAR. Okay.
Okay.
But co-integration is not possible if the variable is stationary. That is I0.
Oh, that's right.
So just tell me, how does international wildlife trade alter species population dynamics and ecosystem stability in India?
Okay, so if I were to look at it from the point of view of the from the point of view of export or import, first I'd like to go from the point of view of export. So, for example, if India is exporting species to other countries, that means India has to procure those species from the natural habitats or the biomes from where those species actually originate. So, if it is happening at an indiscriminate level, then more the extraction capacity outweighs the regeneration capacity among the species over there. It is likely that eventually the species may hit the point of endangerment or extinction, which is where, at least from an exporter's point of view, India might lose its own biodiversity from the export point. Now, if I talk about it from the import point of view, if India is importing species because some pets are imported from other countries. Now, these species are used to a particular particular resources in those countries, which may be available in abundance for the survival. However, if these species are imported into India, then there is no guarantee that there are enough resources in order to actually take care of these species. And also, some naturalized species might just enter in the process when live species are imported, and they may enter into the ecosystem of the importing country. And if they're unable to find resources for survival, they might actually force their way into the ecosystem, the host ecosystem, and try to lead to damage of the host country's biodiversity. So that is how I've tried to link IST and biodiversity. Something I found in the literature.
What role do economic incentives and global demand play in promoting illegal wildlife trade from India?
If it comes to trade policy, then most of what I've observed is regarding use of let's say tariffs or quotas. So you try to put local limits. One more thing I've noticed is that there are sometimes local limits and national limits to the quantity of species that you can actually trade outside the country. So those especially local controls are very helpful because it is from the local habitats wherein species are actually extracted. So if you try to enforce policies at the local level, then it is likely that the species could be conserved at the local level compared to putting national controls. And these could be either in terms of increase in the price, but it is observed that quotas could be more effective because you're actually placing restriction on the number of species that you can extract from a particular habitat for trade, and that will also ensure that the regeneration capacity of the species in the local habitat would be stable. So I feel in that way, trade policy could be. I mean, that is like talking about trade policy. Coming to other non-trade conservation measures, agencies such as the Wildlife Institute of India or the local governance measures could actually be very helpful to enforce help sites list certain species which are which have actually entered the endangered status. So over the years, if certain species in the local areas have actually declined, it's a signal that they are approaching. They are either getting endangered or approaching extinction. So in that regard, local legal enforcements could be very handy.
Thank you. Any other question?
Okay, thank you.
She hasn't joined yet. She hasn't joined. List बंद कर दीजिए. बंद कर दीजिए, बंद कर दीजिए. उस पे होगा, क्रोम में होगा.